Today is Tuesday, April 26th, and a meeting of the Salem-Keizer School Board is called to order. This meeting is a work session. All school board directors are present. Moving on, I would like to move forward and introduce our new vice chair, which we, as you recall, in the last school board meeting, we voted to adopt a new second vice chair and it would be appointed. And I'm happily and honored to introduce Director Knowles Presley as our newest second vice chair. And I'll turn over the mic over to her at this second.
We're moving on to our welcome message. Nice. Look at me, getting all official already.
Congratulations.
Okay. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Welcome y bienvenidos to the Salem-Keizer School Board meeting. At all times, whether we meet in person or virtual as we are tonight, we strive to be inclusive, respectful, and welcoming to our students, staff, educators, administrators, board members, and all community members. We welcome people of all genders, people of African descent, Black, African American, Asian descent, Arab descent, European descent, those who identify as Hispanic, Latinx, people indigenous to this land, and people of mixed and multiple descents. The languages spoken in our communities are welcome: Spanish, English, indigenous language, sign language, Chuukese, Somali, Russian, Chinese, Vietnamese, and many more. People with disabilities, both visible or invisible. People of all religions, believers in all faiths or creeds. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, pansexual, transgender, queer, or others for whom none of the labels fit. Survivors. Your emotions, joy, bliss, grief, rage, indignation, contentment, or disappointment. Your families, genetic and otherwise. Our veterans who proudly served and are currently serving our country. Our elders, those here in this room, in our lives, and those who have passed away. People impacted or displaced by the war in Ukraine and other violent conflicts. And finally, we'd like to welcome the ancestors who lived in this land where we live and work. Welcome the spirits of the Santiam, Kalapuya, Siletz, and Grand Ronde, the natives who lived in this area before the Europeans came. Welcome y bienvenidos.
Thank you. And in the spirit, I'd also like to just recognize in our Arab American Heritage Month and recognize our students and community members of Arab descent. So at this time, I'd also like to ask that you all join me in giving the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So moving on, we have no agenda modifications for today, and we'll go to listen to our superintendent report. So Superintendent Perry.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. We're thrilled to present around our dual language expansion and our secondary English language supports. We put them as 2 agenda items tonight so you could see that we have to have different supports for different kids depending on the system as we expand our dual language programs as well. So Assistant Superintendent Cobb is going to be the main presenter tonight. And what we're hoping for, Chair Vila, is that maybe after the dual language section, we could stop and just ask one question from every board member and then move on to the second part and then come back around for another set of questions. And then what we're also hoping is that then at the end, you'll take time to look at the draft of the dual language resolution as a first reading and make comments from there. So with that, Assistant Superintendent Cobb, it's all you. She has a number of people listening behind the scenes tonight too, so that if we get to questions that she might not have answers for, she can direct those to other people as well. So good to see you, Assistant Superintendent Cobb, and it's all yours.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening, Chair Avila, Vice Chair Knowles Presley, board directors, Grace and Superintendent Perry. Today I'll be sharing, like Superintendent shared, information about our services for language learners, and that will include two parts. One is our progress in expansion of dual language programming, and then our work on secondary English language development program redesign. Next slide, please. Thank you, Ethan. Go back one to the pictures. Perfect, thank you. So first of all, I wanted to center us in our students for the conversation. I wanted to start by describing who our language learners are. All of these programming and all of the changes and implementations are really about improving services for them. Our language learners could be a student who enters kindergarten with very little English and strong skills in Spanish or Marshallese or Arabic or any other language. They could also be a student from Hispanic heritage who comes to us with very strong English and some Spanish skills, and who maybe doesn't qualify as an English language learner under the state definitions because their English is good enough to start instruction in English only. They could also be a student who comes to us in middle school with no formal English instruction, but very strong academic skills in their home language. Or a student like Francine, who some of you met in our high school presentation about safety series, who shared in that presentation that English and Spanish are her fourth and fifth languages. So these are just four descriptions of many. My point here is that there's not a one-size-fits-all programming for our students learning English. And our educators and our work is to look for ways to offer different entry points to support our students, just very complex and rich cultural, linguistic, and academic development journey. Next slide, Ethan. Thank you. So let's talk about dual language first. Down, next, you went up. There you go, thank you. So let's talk about our dual language, which is one of the strategies to support our language learners, and how we are working to expand this opportunity and provide more access to students in our district. Like Superintendent said, I will pause for questions after dual language before moving into our English language development redesign work at the secondary level. So I wanted to also remind us of some key definitions about dual language. Dual language is a form of education in which students are taught literacy and content in two languages. It is considered an additive bilingual model because we're adding a second academic language for our students. And instead of letting go of the minority language or the first language that they speak, the goal is to develop both languages. Our target languages at this time in Salem-Keizer are English and Spanish. So you'll hear us talk about two kinds of programs. One is a two-way program. When we talk about a two-way dual language model, we refer to the group of students who are participating in the program as being from both of the languages used in the program model. So we have students who are Spanish speakers or have Spanish spoken at home and they're learning English. They're learning English and Spanish in that trajectory. And then we also have students who speak English at home and are learning Spanish and going in that dual language trajectory. So we serve those two groups. Remember, our goal is to have all students become bilingual, bicultural, and biliterate in the program. A one-way model refers to a program that supports one language group of students to become bilingual, bicultural, and biliterate. When we talk about one-way models in Salem-Keizer, that is a student whose primary language is Spanish at home, or they have heritage Spanish and they're learning English and Spanish in that trajectory. You'll hear me explain later that in middle school and high school, we have to start with a one-way model because remember, we're waiting for our English speakers to join the program as they develop from kindergarten on. So, but I'll go into detail about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. As I have shared before in the boardroom, the dual language program focuses on developing inclusive environments with research-based approaches to make sure that our students are developing high levels of proficiency in both languages. We are focused on ensuring that our program model follows effective instructional components, that it provides strong cultural and social learning opportunities for our students. And we know that research has proven that students that graduate from the program perform better than their peers on standardized tests in English. In dual language classrooms, students learn to collaborate and depend on each other to support the development of each of these languages and to use their language repertoire or the menu of words in both languages that they have to access content. They learn from and with each other in these classrooms, and this increases cognitive flexibility, attention, problem-solving, and memory. Problem-solving skills and memory. In Salem-Keizer, our students have the great opportunity to also earn the nationally recognized Seal of Biliteracy at graduation, which certifies or endorses their ability to perform academically in both languages. Next slide, Ethan, please. You also hear us talking about the dual language pillars. And these pillars are closely aligned with our strategic plan goals for instruction at the right time and in the right way for each student. These pillars are high academic achievement for our students, social cultural competence. Remember, this is a critical pillar. Language and culture are assets to learn about, to develop, and to celebrate. The second pillar is all about inclusion and honoring our students' backgrounds and heritage, all students that participate in the program. And then our last pillar there is bilingualism and biliteracy, because students are learning content via two languages. They must be able to speak and read and write and listen and use each of the two languages as support for the other as they access content. Next slide, please. This timeline is also something that you have seen in the past, but I have some updates for you today. We have incredible knowledge within our district, amazing bilingual staff and bilingual principals and bilingual professionals and principals who really believe in the development of the program, but we also needed the expertise from consultants to work on dual language implementation. And we found a group that works at the national level and with districts as large or larger than Salem-Keizer. So Dual Language of New Mexico is the organization that is providing guidance and training for our schools. We have already identified regarding the timeline, we have already identified a district leadership team, an advisory team. We have had 3 professional development sessions with the consultants, and we just had site visits to the 4 elementary schools that will start a 2-way program in 22-23. Something to note is that during the visits, the team, During the visits, the team met with staff, with parents. They did classroom observations, so they met our students. And they also met with the district advisory team for a debrief. We are anxiously waiting for the final report, but some preliminary comments that I wanted to share with you is number one, the excitement among staff about the readiness to start the program in these schools. Their positive feedback on our Grow Your Own efforts. They met some teachers who were instructional assistants and now are bilingual teachers, and they just shared about the supports that they have received from our district, and they were pretty impressed by that. They also heard from our parents the appreciation for the expansion of this opportunity to more schools and mostly to schools in the Northeast area and in Keizer. Our parents had amazing comments about how they wanted to keep both languages, but they know that if their students have English as a stronger language, then they would lose the Spanish. And so these just gave them a lot of hope. And of course, parents who speak English at home wanted this opportunity for their students too. And then we also heard from them the need to continue investing in bilingual materials, in instructional resources, and then in assessments that will continue to support this work, which is also something we're deeply engaged in and making some important investments in. Next slide, please. So the chart in front of you shows you the 4 elementary schools that will start in fall of 22-23. And then we also wanted to give you some key numbers to help you understand why these decisions are important for these communities. So Chavez and Keizer will start with a kinder and first grade classrooms. And then Washington and Four Corners will start with kinder programs. It was important for us to also point out some numbers that demonstrate how schools have optimal conditions to start these programs next year. In the screen, you can see in that third column the total population of the school. Then you'll see how many kids in the school are of Hispanic heritage and the percentage that they represent. So let's look at Chavez, for example, that 75% represent the students who speak Spanish or hear Spanish at home. Now, the 46% represents the students who qualify as English language learners according to the state guidelines. So what this tells us is that there are more language learners than just the 46% who qualify. And so there's a lot of language richness in these schools that we can take advantage of to build a program that serves not only our language learners, but also our students that speak English at home who want to access both languages and be bilingual and bicultural and biliterate. Next slide, please. So we wanted to just give you an idea of what does the program really look like at the elementary, middle school, and high school level. So I'll spend some time talking about that before I take your questions. At elementary, you see in there that we have in green instruction in Spanish and in blue instruction in English. We are following an 80-20 language model. What it means is that students in kindergarten start with instruction in Spanish for 80% of their day, and 20% of their day will happen in English. The instruction then gradually increases until they get to 4th grade, when students stay at 50% of their day, of their daily instruction in English and 50% of their daily instruction in Spanish. And these percentages are sustained through 12th grade in a dual language program. Next slide, please. So remember, our plan is to be able to ensure that we have a dual language pathway from kinder to graduation. So we are planning and growing right now our program towards this goal. We're not there yet in our middle schools and high schools, but Waldo, Stevens, and possibly Claggett are starting to develop their site leadership teams and are planning to start a one-way model with maybe 1 or 2 classes. We're in the middle of hiring and designing what the programs would look like at the elementary level for next year, and super excited about that. So again, we wanted to show you some numbers that help us make these decisions. And so let's look at the population at Waldo. We have about 71% of students who already have these assets. They have both languages, and we can now hopefully offer all of the students at Waldo in a few years the opportunity to have dual language experiences. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show you what it will look like at a middle school once we get to that 50-50% ratio. Remember, we are not there yet. We are growing towards these. This is our goal for program design. But by the time we develop the two-way program in our dual language middle schools, they will offer half of their classes in English and half of their classes in Spanish. So I listed an example in the screen for each grade level. For example, in 7th grade, a student could be taking 3 classes in Spanish. They could be language arts, math, and social studies, or an elective. And then in English, they'll be taking 3 other classes. It could be language arts in English. It could be science and an elective. So half and half of the instruction in each of the languages. Okay, next slide, please. These are high schools. So let's take a look at our high schools. We have 2 high schools that started, that are deeply engaged in the development of the program. McNary and McKay have a site leadership team who's developing the plan that includes professional development for staff to start a Spanish language arts or heritage Spanish class. Again, it was important for us to show you the demographics of the schools just as another point of reference. We are excited that Keizer, for example, and Klagen at McNary are engaging in planning so we can have a dual language pathway in the Keizer area. Then by the time we implement our program in our schools, we'll have a pathway in West Salem, we'll have a pathway in North, we'll have a pathway in McKay and in McNary High Schools, which gets us very excited about our plans. The principals and the teams in these schools are, again, engaged in hiring the right staff to start planning with our middle and our elementary partners in alignment. So we are ready for when students come up from kinder through middle to high school grades. At McNary, for example, they have 2 classes that will continue next year. They already have them, Heritage Spanish 1 and 2. And the team is excited to start planning for Heritage 3 and 4. And maybe in the year 23-24, add a Spanish language arts class for a Spanish language arts class, for 9th grade. So I want to be clear, at the high schools, it's all a planning year, this year and next, but they have some classes that are giving them the opportunity to try instructional practices before they officially start their dual language one-way model in the near future. Next slide, please. So again, this is just a formula or what the design would look like at a high school by the time the high schools fully develop the program. They'll be able to do half of the content in English and half of the content in Spanish. Dual Language of New Mexico will come back in the fall for site visits to secondary schools. The implementation of secondary just looks different because they have to start again with 1 or 2 classes in a one-way model while we build capacity for staff and students to join the program as they come up the grades. So more support and more planning and more professional development is being provided now to secondary as we get our elementary schools up and running in the fall. Something important too is that staff members from all schools, elementary, middle, and high, are going to engage in professional development opportunities this summer. And they will also participate in a dual language conference where Dual Language New Mexico is helping us just develop the skills to start the programs. So I'll stop here for dual language and take any questions. I have Teresa Tolento, who's one of our leaders for dual language instruction. She's our director for curriculum and instruction at the elementary level. We have Gwen Bruy-Fink, who's our director for secondary curriculum and instruction. We have Dr. West, who you know, and Dr. Udosenata, who are here to answer any questions. Chair Avila, I'll pass it back to you for dual language questions.
Yeah, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I switched head mics. That's excellent. I'm excited to see this roll out. I'm looking forward to the report from Dual Language New Mexico team that came in. I'm excited to speak with them as well as everybody that's been part of this. So I see Director Hine has a question. So go ahead, Director Hine.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question from a member of the public, and I think I knew the answer, but I just wanted to kind of put it out there in case others had the same question. So we're starting with a small set of schools in specific grades. And my experience on the school board has been when we roll out something new, that's what we do. And we work out the bugs and get the processes all working. And then we look at expanding it. So those 4 elementary schools that we're starting with now, I believe, is not the end. That's the beginning. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We want to start slow to make sure that we have the right hiring practices to make sure that we can staff all schools. And our plan is to, in 23-24, add 7 or 8 elementary schools. And then in 24-25, add 7 or 8 elementary schools. And hopefully by 26, we have 21 total elementary schools that are doing dual language programming. And then again, by then we would have 2 or 3 middle schools also joining the program that are going to start in 6th grade, growing to 7th grade, and then the 2 high schools that will start also offering a one-way model in 23-24, and then keep growing their program while they wait for our students that are coming up in the grades.
So will the endpoint be the entire district offered everywhere, or is it always just going to be a portion of the district?
I think we just keep looking at our population and the interest in the community. Part of the important component of the visit from Dual Language New Mexico was to look at the readiness of the staff, the readiness of the parents, and the community feedback. And so I think we'll just continue engaging in those to make sure that we're adding the schools that are ready for the program. It would be great, if you asked me, it would be great that we had all 65 schools be dual language schools, and not only English and Spanish, but what if we could add another language, right? What if we could do a dual language program for Russian or Marshallese? But we have to start slow and steady and make sure that we have very strong practices before we expand too fast.
Thank you.
Would be my opinion. Thank you.
As other directors are thinking about questions, I do have a question on the impact of how will this dual language impact students at the high school level that want to go into CTEC and get accepted into CTEC to meet, the CTEC requirements, the dual language requirements. Obviously, the graduation requirements are built into there, but how does that look like right now? And I know it might be in the planning stages.
Yes. We actually started conversation with our CTE and CTEC partners to make sure that we can start exploring courses that can be provided in Spanish and that can have credits towards graduation. So that is part of the plan. And in that last design or formula example that I showed for high school, we wanted to include the CTEC and CTE course as one of the options. We want those classes to be in Spanish, and we want also for them to have credits attached to them. And Eton, if I'm missing something, I know this is your area of expertise, or Gwen, please add something to the answer.
You're spot on.
Great, thank you. Director Chandagiri?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deputy Superintendent Cobb. I appreciate, and I really want to thank all of you for doing this. I mean, this is wonderful. And I've sent some of the questions which we can discuss later. But, as a physician coming from a different country and originally, like a fairly busy country with many languages, close to 20,000. For me, language barrier can be fatal. I've seen a lot of people just having horrible hospital experience, or some even die without. In my profession, I can't practice without language. So to me, there are huge benefits in closing the health equity gap, or social gaps, or so many different things. And the sooner we kind of start that, it is very helpful. And the second thing we talked about, will we have all the schools? I think we really have to look at the demographic shift in our country. By 2050, the greatest number of, the language spoken will be Spanish. The percentage will go up in 0 to 17. So if you start looking at it in terms of we're going to be a multilingual nation, whether we like it or not. That's the way the demographics are shifting. So to me, having this bilingual or multilingual, and not just lingual, but multiliterate, is very essential, whether you're saving lives in hospitals, or somebody struggling with suicidal thought and they cannot express it in English, or they cannot express it. I've seen outcomes that have not been good, not been pretty. So it's really critical. It's life-saving. And, in our own state, for example, 27% of our 0 to 8 years are multilingual potential. At least one parent speaks a language other than English. So we have such a wonderful asset. Thank you very much. This will allow you to nurture and get that all up running. And what a beautiful society we can have by that. And all of them can be productive citizens and contribute and have very flourishing life trajectory by starting early. My hope is at some stage we are able to extend it to early learning program, even before they come to school, we can really start. That should be the ideal age group, in my opinion. Even waiting till middle school or even elementary school, it's a little too late. I started with 4 languages, but English was unfortunately one of the last language at age 12 I could speak. So between me and my wife, we speak 8 languages. And I use an interpreter to talk to my wife's family. Just to illustrate. But I've seen sometimes I cannot explain what I want to explain, nor health conditions. We cannot understand each other. So thank you for doing this. I sent you the question, so at some stage you can answer. Appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Director Chandragiri. Director Guzman Ortiz.
Just want to echo the appreciation. If you could again, Superintendent Cobb, briefly restate the process in selecting the schools again. I did notice as we saw some of those demographic numbers that some of the schools, for example, had higher numbers or percentages of ELL students versus others that had smaller percentages. Like I think there was like a 2% there. So I just would love to hear a little bit more about what went behind selecting schools and understanding, of course, that it's a scaling project. And then I do have a second question, but let's address the first one first.
Yes, of course. Yes. So remember, we start with our elementaries, and I don't know, Dr. Dosenata, if you want to put the chart back up, or I'll just remind you of the numbers. So for the elementaries, we have schools with 75, 72, 77, and 49% of students who speak Spanish or are of Hispanic heritage. So the school has optimal conditions to start the program. Keizer and another, so one factor is the students. The second factor is the staff readiness. We need to make sure that we have a strong bilingual program already in place, so that we can turn it into the dual language program. And we have 4 schools that have amazing instructional practices for our English language learners, and they were ready to move to this next step. And then the third one was the readiness of the community. That's why it was important that we gathered some information from community and that we brought the Dual Language of New Mexico team to meet with them. So in the slide with the high school, Dr. Dosenata, if you can get there to the 2%, McNary has 2% of students who qualify for ELL services under the state definition, but they have 40% of our students who already speak Spanish or have Spanish as a language at home. And then remember, our goal is that we can be ready for the students that are coming in from Keizer that are almost 50% too, to get to the high school at McNary. So it's another effort to have another pathway that is a K-12 pathway. Now, this doesn't mean that the other elementary schools are not ready. It's just that we needed to start with a few, to do a good job with a few, and that's why next year we'll bring 7 that I bet if some principals are hearing me right now will say, wait a minute, I'm ready too, my staff is ready, my community is ready, but we just wanted to start slow and steady to be able to grow in a good way, in a way that works for our schools and our system. I hope I answered your question, and team, if I'm missing something, please add anything that you have.
I appreciate that, and thanks for kind of clarifying the different areas that were looked at. And then just for the second one, understanding the need, I was curious about, and I would imagine that this is part of the process and the plan moving forward, but could you share anything so far in terms of plans or adaptations to the professional development, seeing that we're seeing increased need for bilingual educators. So I'm sure there's more in the works, but if there's any updates or anything that's been identified so far, I'd be helpful.
Yes, I'll start, and then I'll have Mrs. Tolento and Mrs. Bruy-Frank help me with professional development if I'm missing something. But we are doing lots of, trainings that started already with leadership teams at each of the schools. And then we're engaging in summer professional development opportunities with Dual Language of New Mexico. We are taking our staff to a summer seminar where we're going to look at instructional practices that work for dual language schools, how to teach content and add language proficiency standards in these content classes, how to model and co-teach so that our teams learn to collaborate closely as we're developing the skills to build the program completely. We have some trainings that will be directed specifically and targeted for the kinder and first grade teachers, but we also have other trainings for the whole staff, because remember, we're trying to shift practice and have schools that are all dual language schools. And so we need our fifth grade teacher to understand what that means for their practice when the students come up in the grades and get to them in 4 years. Mrs. Tolento and Mrs. Bruy-Frank, anything that you want to add on that?
Yes, I'd like to add that part of our goal has been to align our existing programs with our new programs, and so they will also receive training this summer about the instructional framework and professional development with language acquisition strategies. And in addition to that, all of our other bilingual teachers who are not yet implementing dual language will also receive professional development as a form of preparing and getting ready for that. And we also have a plan to continue to support them throughout the school year.
Thank you.
Thank you, really appreciate it.
Could you, on that note, I think it kind of connects to it with the bilingual teachers program. Would that be a potential pathway for this question? Can you elaborate?
You mean our bilingual scholars? Oh, yes. So we are, something that we feel really proud of is our Grow Your Own program and our partnerships with the universities. And we try to get to our own students when they are in high school. And if they are interested in being a teacher, then we immediately partner with one of our universities so that they can join a program. We call them our bilingual scholars, and become a bilingual teacher for our district. We also have a pathway for our own employees, an instructional assistant, a community outreach coordinator, just any employee that wants to become a teacher. And we engage in a partnership with the university so that we can, again, help them get into those positions as bilingual teachers pretty early on. And like I shared before, in the interviews that the Dual Language of New Mexico team did in these 4 schools, they found examples, and they said that they were pretty impressed by our district's practice, because the teacher said, I was an instructional assistant, or I worked in the office and somebody invited me to participate in the program, and now I'm a teacher. So we'll continue these practices in the future. I actually asked Brian last week to give me some numbers, and I think we have a total of 53 bilingual scholars that have gone through our program and have started as an employee that went to being a bilingual teacher in our schools. And I can bring some of those numbers. We can send some numbers or bring some of those numbers to another presentation.
Great, thank you. And I'll just add Chemeketa as another pathway, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Director Nahos Pressy?
I was wondering about the starting at kinder and first. I think you said Chavez and Keizer, right, are doing kinder and first. So I was wondering, so does that mean that like incoming first graders will be able to participate in the dual language program? And I guess since normally we do like a trajectory where they have to start at kindergarten, right? So is there any like adjustments that need to happen or any specific like requirements that they need to meet to start in first grade?
I think these two schools are ready because they already have the population to start the program in first grade, and they have the staffing that is ready to start the program. We usually, the entry to the program happens in kinder or first grade. If we have a student who's ready and parents are ready for the challenge of learning two languages, we usually add students in kinder and first grade, both. English and Spanish speakers, both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Grace?
So because they're learning two languages, starting very young, which is very impressive. I've met some students, I'm like, oh my gosh. I guess my only concern is, how do we make sure that they stay on track with this? Students who are, how do they keep on track with like test scores and curriculum when they're doing two languages at once?
So students are developing all of those cognitive skills in both of those languages. And remember, we teach them strategies to use one language to support the other. So it is a little challenging as they're developing those two. And so in second grade, usually, or third grade, we hear from students, this is hard, or we hear from parents, this is getting really hard. They're learning at a little slower pace, but it's just while they get the hang of processing in those two languages. Then after that, usually, remember, we have to follow what the research has proven for 40 years. And is that when we do this well and we give students access to content and language in these two languages, our students outperform everyone else by the time they graduate. And then we have graduates that are bilingual, bicultural, and can perform academically or in a job, in a work site in those two languages very successfully academically. So it's a long and sometimes a hard journey because it's a lot of work, but at the end, it's an incredible opportunity for our students with incredible results.
Thank you.
It's a great question. I can personally testify the impact that our students graduating from West Salem and going to Western as an advisor, and I'd say their test results and testing into Spanish, the third level, they were 2 years away from completing a Spanish minor. That's cost savings right there if they wanted to pursue that. So I'm amazed. And also, when we moved to West Salem, there was a program called Amiguitos, to Director Chandigiri's point, pre-K. My wife was hired on, and I was able to participate in that program and see these children just be a vacuum of knowledge and language. And I know some of these little young kids still today, they speak Spanish very well, and we're talking 8, 9, 10-year-olds. So very impressive. Thank you. I look forward to getting this rolling out. So I really appreciate it. I see no other questions, so if you'd like to continue on then. One last question, Director Chandigiri.
Well, thank you very much. I really think, it's really, Chair mentioned that two languages kids, the greatest advantage is the way you can get the actual phonetics and the pronunciation. It's like, even if I speak English, it sounds like a foreign-born speaking English to you all. But when you have little kids exposed to more than one language, they speak almost like a native language speaker. And that's an amazing part of it. You can easily recognize when I speak English versus a little kid. And I see that same thing in my own kids. When the little kid, they can speak like anybody else locally. But when we go, it's like parents are speaking with a foreign-born accent, whereas kids are speaking. That is a huge advantage. And little kids can soak in many languages, more than two. So I think this is going to be a great advantage for these kids. And I really think this will be wonderful. It's like learning music. In the beginning, it's hard. Mom and dad will have to say, keep practicing this key. Eventually it clicks. And that's how these languages work. I used to dream in foreign language before the first year, and then now I dream in English. It just changes, something changes in the brain. I don't know what it is, but it changes for good. There's no side effects to learning more than one language to all the community. There's nobody is going to be harmed by learning two languages. So send your kids to this program.
That's correct. Thank you, Director Chandigiri. Superintendent Perry, you want to continue on with the presentation on the next topic?
Yeah, and Assistant Superintendent Cobb is going to tackle the next topic as well. So we're shifting from dual language to how do we serve our secondary students who might come to us with with different skills. And so she's going to walk through some of that and show you some of the progress we're making and center a little bit on how students are different when they come to us in high school.
Yes, thank you. Superintendent Perry. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in 2019-2020 school year, our secondary leadership team engaged in a process to find the root cause to get to the why we were getting the low achievement results for students designated as English learners. The team got to some key priority root causes and quickly started addressing these needs as part of their strategic planning. They determined that there was a need to elevate the voices of our diverse students. They needed to retrain teachers and prioritize language learner, and these had to happen in all learning spaces. We couldn't teach English as a separate class if we were not helping students make the connections to what they were learning in content. So in science and math and social studies and language arts. And these needed to happen with all teachers in the school. Everybody at the school needed to understand language acquisition. And then they also discussed the need to own the work together. Again, we had some English language teachers who were helping students learn a language, but we needed the work of language acquisition to be owned by all and to happen in every one of the learning spaces at the school. Next slide, please. So the Eld Redesign Continuum that you see in the screen came out of this process of reflection and evaluation of our practices and the data, the results that our students were getting. It is based on truly providing the right support at the right time for every student. This continuum of services is based on language learning, proficiency in 4 domains. Remember, the 4 domains that we assess are reading, writing, Spanish, speaking, and listening. And an important change is that these supports allow students to learn language and content at the same time. Remember, like I said before, we can't separate language from learning a specific content or a specific standard. This continuum also represents how students are supported. So it goes from a very targeted support in that blue column, where an emergent bilingual who maybe scored a level 1 or 2 in their domains is participating in very targeted instruction, to that yellow column where a student who's scoring 4s and 5s in those domains, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, can participate in general education classes and just have some additional supports for language acquisition. A point that I want to make here before we move on is that 85% of the English learners in our district speak Spanish or hear Spanish at home. So students that are in this emerging category in the blue will have more access to content through receiving some of these classes in Spanish. So to get back to that question that Grace asked, if we have a student who's just developing English, but we know that they are a strong Spanish speaker, we can teach them algebra in Spanish and then just help them with all the language that they need to transfer that skill, that math skill, into the second language. We don't need to teach them algebra twice. We just teach them the language so that they can explain and justify everything that they learned already in their first language, that is already solidified for them and in their brain. And we just teach them skills to be able to say it in a second language. Next slide, please. So the secondary ELD redesign is supported through our SIA funds, our student investment accounts. We have additional staff that are supporting this work. A total of 9.5 teachers have been added to help us with this work. And to go a little bit in depth about the services, what exactly these services look like. Integrated ELD means that we may have a teacher who's a language arts teacher and an English language development teacher who co-teach, so two teachers with two different specialties, and they co-teach and integrate the work around standards for literacy and language acquisition, and they're constantly adding those proficiency standards for English. Or it could be a language acquisition expert teacher who is consulting with teachers that teach content for some targeted instruction. And it also could be that a student needs more intensive language support, so they participate in a very targeted class to support their language needs. It all depends on what students need, and it's determined again by the ELPA data assessment that I told you about that has those 4 domains. And we also base it on formative assessments, teacher observations, and staff are always monitoring and evaluating their practice to make sure that what we're doing is what the students need at that specific time. Next slide, please. So again, language proficiency standards are included in every core language arts class and in everything we do at the school. If we have a language learner, we know that we need to give them the language skills to be able to access the content, to access the learning or the standards. And schools are deeply engaged in this work, and we have a total of 165 middle school and high school teachers that are part of these efforts. So it's a pretty big undertaking. Again, that started with that reflection from our secondary leaders that wanted to just change some practices to do better for our ELs at the secondary level. Next slide, please. So next one. Okay, thank you. Part of the secondary ELD redesign is our close look at our newcomer centers. So let me tell you first how many newcomers we have welcomed in our district. In this year, we have welcomed 1,700 students who are just brand new to our country and our system. And that is 500 more than in previous school years. Nearly half of them come from countries in the African and Asian continents, including 76 students who are Afghan refugees. So let me describe in the next slide what the Newcomer Program looks like. Our Newcomer programs, again, welcome students who are brand new to our country and our system. We have added staff this year to support with SIA funding, and you see in the screen there licensed teachers, instructional assistants, and bilingual classified staff that are helping us change the model a little bit, because our current model is that we serve the newcomers in a self-contained class, and that means that they are in one classroom for most of their day or for their whole day, with peers who are also new arrivals. So the redesign work will change that. And let me go over these important changes in the next slide. Thank you. So we are working and preparing to implement these changes in 22-23. Our students that are newcomers will have more access to general education classes, and instructional strategies will be implemented in all of those classrooms at all grade levels to support language acquisition. School staff is heavily involved in reimagining this program and making sure that we are differentiating the support for each student. So I'm going to go back to my example of algebra. Let's say that we have a student who comes to us from Russia, and in his transcripts, we see that he has successfully finished 2 algebra classes. Instead of having them repeat that algebra class, we are going to have that student participate in a language experience that will give him the skills and the language to be able to transfer all of that math knowledge and be able to explain and justify all of those math processes in English, because they already know how to do that. They already have those skills. We just need to transfer it into English. So our staff is, again, deeply engaged in figuring out exactly what each of our students need to be successful, and then consider what they bring with them as an asset that will help in the process of goals for graduation. Something else that was shared with me just recently is that we are exploring new technologies in our newcomer centers, and they have these computer programs. I want to say through PowerPoint, but Teresa and Gwen will correct me if I'm saying it wrong. But students can actually have a presentation that the teacher is doing in English, translated in the moment in like 100 languages. So again, we're trying to get to different entry points to allow students to use what they bring as an asset to be able to develop the skills, not only academic skills, but language skills needed to graduate successfully. And then, of course, nothing can happen without collaboration, without training, without supports and shared accountability. Our secondary staff is engaged in figuring out services and monitoring the system together. And actually, this past week, Mrs. Bruy-Frink and the level directors at the secondary led their secondary staff through planning, and the Eld Redesign is part of that strategic planning for next year. Key component of that plan for next year. Next slide, please. So we wanted to share some early success indicators that we feel pretty proud of because we just started this work in 1920, again, in planning. And then, after the pandemic, we've had some pretty positive results. In our 4-year graduation rates for students designated as ELs, we have improved from 48% in 18-19 to 60% in 2021. More students are accessing at least one honors, AP, or international baccalaureate courses that are currently ELs. So all of this data is focused on our ELs. In 1920, we had about 1% of our students, and now we have 6.2% of our students that are enrolled in these programs. Next slide, please. This first data point that talks about our EL student sense of belonging and teacher-student relationship is something that makes us, that is pretty significant for us. This data from 1920 was from fall before the pandemic started, and our students were at 50% sense of belonging, and then student-teacher relationships was 55%. And then in 2021, this fall data was taken the year and a half after distance learning, and when we just welcomed back our secondary students into our schools. And sense of belonging is at 51%, and teacher-student relationships 67%. And remember, we're not to the percentages that we want to be. We want to be more than 50%, but to us, this is a celebration of our teachers and staff who prioritize relationships and connection to our students during that really weird time we just went through. And then we continue hopefully investing and making a lot of progress in this area. And then this last data point is one of the ways in which ODE calculates disproportionate discipline. And it's written a little weird, and it's right from ODE, so I'll explain it in two ways. One is students in 1819 that were not excluded due to discipline are 84%, and in 21-22 we did not exclude 93% of our students. So I'm going to flip that and tell you these data in a different way. In 1819, we excluded 15.2% of our students who were ELs because of discipline. And in 21-22, we excluded 7% of our students who are ELs because of discipline. We still have work to do, but this is an indicator that behavior systems are working, especially for lower and mid-level behavior issues. Next slide, please. Dual language and secondary ELD redesign are not the only initiatives that elevate and honor the assets that our students bring. We have a new law that actually allows students to earn credits toward graduation, even when the standards are taught in a language different to English. And then we also have a new world language by proficiency program that allows students to earn credit by assessment in another language and earn the seal of biliteracy. So to challenge a language and do a test that will work towards the seal of biliteracy. And I'll give you some numbers in the next slide. So this year to date, we have 150 students who earned 741 world language course credits. These are fine arts credits that count towards graduation in 10 different languages. We can count those now. And then 78 of these students have also earned the seal of biliteracy. Now, before the meeting today, we also received an update from secondary that said that in total, we have 475 students from 9th grade to 12th grade who have met the language requirements to qualify for the seal of biliteracy if all other graduation requirements, of course, are met. But these could possibly mean that 475 right now, it could be more, right, in the next few years, 475 students will get the seal of biliteracy by the time they're done in high school. Again, all these efforts directly support and set the foundation for our dual language programs and for our expansion. So our secondary team members and partners are preparing, so when our students come through the years, then we're ready to have those really, really strong schools for all language learners. And then something worth mentioning here is that allowing credits of language arts from international schools and honoring those transcripts will also help us lay down the groundwork for a possibility of dual language programs in other languages different to English and Spanish. So if we are ready in a few years to have a dual language program in Russian, Marshallese, you name it, then all of these things that are being put in place are going to only help us set the foundation for that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we still have a lot of work to do, but we are encouraged with our early results, and we also know that we need to continue refining our placement work, remember the right support for each student at the right time. We also know that we need to provide intensive professional development and supports to teachers, starting with our August Institute that we're having K-12. We continue to align and elevate this work as part of our strategic goals that are language acquisition across all classes, equity teams to elevate the staff, the student, and the community voices, and behavior redesign to ensure the reduction in disproportionate discipline. Next slide, please. We'll continue monitoring, evaluating, and adjusting our practices, and then continue our focus on dual language expansion and providing access to graduation credits by allowing students to use other languages to demonstrate proficiency in the standards. And then the last slide, Chair Avila, this is the end of the presentation. We have the proclamation next, but we are happy to take questions about secondary ELD redesign if the board has any. And again, my colleagues are here to support with questions if needed.
Thank you again for this presentation as well. Very important that we approach all of our students and provide the services that they adequately need to be able to be successful students for that next step in life. I really appreciate how we're tying in prior learning experiences and asset-based approaches through these programs that you've mentioned, and allowing students to apply their strengths and knowledge so that we can assist them, and no more deficit thinking approaches. I really love it. Thank you. Director Hyatt?
Yes, thank you. So I know that Waldo Middle School has a welcome center. I was curious, what schools in our district are welcome centers?
Gwen, can you help me with the names of the 3 schools, please?
Yeah, it's Waldo Middle School for our middle level program, and then it's McKay and North for our high schools. And it's important to clarify that all of our high schools, any student can go to their home neighborhood high school. So when students come in as a new arriver, they're given the option to go to a newcomer center at McKay or North or Waldo, or they also have the opportunity to go to their neighborhood school if they'd like. It's just that the services are clustered specifically for them at those newcomer centers, and that's what's explained to parents and the families when they come through Gateway.
So Waldo is the only middle school that has the welcome center.
Correct.
And then elementary schools, because of where students are at, don't require that kind of service.
And no, they do, but at elementary schools, there's a lot of because they're with one teacher most of their day. All of our teachers there's a lot of supports in the school for language development, either through their main teacher, and most of the time is their classroom teacher, who is an expert in language acquisition. So it just looks different than the middle and high schools where students go from one class to the other.
And so I don't need an answer to this today, but I'm just curious. I'd already asked the superintendent a population question for Waldo, and I know we're at about 1,300, and I'm just curious how many of those are part of the Welcome Center versus just regular, from the neighborhoods. Sometime that would be nice to know. Thank you.
Director Hyatt, just to clarify the question, so it's how many students are a part of Waldo's Newcomer Center that don't also live in the neighborhood, or do you want both of those numbers? So students who live in Waldo's area and are part, plus the students coming from other places in the district?
Yeah, I think both of that pieces of information would be really interesting. I had some parents asking questions whose children are going to go to Waldo next year, and it just be really good to have an understanding of the whole population of the school. Thank you.
Director Chandigiri?
Well, thank you very much. The question is, when we are setting a budget, what kind of arrangement are we going to be making and changes in budget so that there is a place for, say, tutoring or mentoring program attached to this, either the recent arrival immigrant English learners or bilingual, the dual program? And are we going to get some licenses so that the copyright does not prevent parents from getting hold of textbooks so they can, because when you're learning 2 languages, parents also have to do some work of helping with homework or, following it up with either a tutor or a community member who wants to volunteer and help the family. So will there be some kind of budgetary changes made to buy textbooks in 2 languages, which they can take it home? It takes a little longer to learn in 2 languages than 1 language. Same thing with copyright. Sometimes copyright cannot become a barrier for these children. and what percentage of our library books will have books in 2 languages. And same thing with computer software or whatever we are going to be using, so that we have the materials provided. Will there be some kind of budget set aside for family support, teaching family adults a little bit of the language so they can also be assisting their family, either from the Title I or wherever else the dollar comes from?
So we are making important investments in materials, instructional materials, assessments, curriculum, professional development for teachers that are in supporting ELs and that are engaged also in the dual language programming. Also, as part of our HB 3499 plans, there is a component of tutoring that are specific to support English language learners at the secondary, and Director Bruy-Frank is deeply engaged in these process. And anything else that the team wants to add?
I can add from a library materials perspective, because I also supervise library media services that we do for our dual schools. We include Spanish language titles in our ordering just as we go. So it's some of the things that you're asking about, Director Chandragiri, are embedded and integrated into the processes we already have. So it's not necessarily an additive budget item. It's just it's already included in the way that we do things. So curriculum, for example, my office has purchased in the past, in conjunction with some other funds, purchased curriculum in Spanish for our social studies teachers, for example, at the middle level. So it's embedded in the things we already do. So my perspective is you wouldn't necessarily see it as a called out separate additive thing, because we integrate it into the ways that we already do things.
In other words, each child can take some books home, right? Whether it's both English and Spanish language, so that, most of the time they need to sit and study at home also. The school alone is not enough to practice if you're practicing in 2 languages. In other words, all kids can carry one home language book in Spanish and English, so that either neighbors or parents or whoever else can sit and teach them or help them with homework. Will that be possible for everybody to get hold of a textbook, take it home in 2 languages, or only limited number of books the teachers will hold and children can't take it home? Will there be a license for every kid? That's what I'm asking, simple.
Yes, we already have a lot of resources that students can take home in different languages and in Spanish for these programs. And then we also have, you also mentioned some systems for that are supported in the Chromebooks. And we have those programs too that are in English and in Spanish that have been available to students and that we increased access for in the pandemic.
During the pandemic, the teachers were sitting and translating material from English to Spanish and things like that. But at least moving forward, can we provide our teachers printed textbooks? They don't have to sit and translate, but we can buy good books, good quality books that they don't have to sit and translate and then teach, because I was told that they were sitting and translating in the middle of a pandemic. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't remember properly, but we should set aside some money for that. That's what I'm hoping. Because if you have a good quality program without materials and books, it defeats the whole purpose. We don't want to kind of make it an anemic program. We want to make sure we provide the best quality books and materials for all the kids and make sure all the teachers have it. That way they don't have to get distracted other than teaching. And parents can sit at home and read the same book and explain it to the child, or neighbor can come and help. That's what I'm hoping. Let's put a proper investment for this program so it's successful for everybody. It's too long we have waited.
Yeah, we agree with that. And also, just directors, your slides are at the top of your email. We just forgot to hit send, and we'll also have them on the website for anyone that is looking for them. And finally, just for all of us that might not know this, every single time we've been being sure that we translate the slides into Spanish. So on the Spanish channel, we get out the slides ahead of time to our Spanish-speaking families that listen in.
Yeah, thank you. Good questions. And I think that's also a call for a larger city conversation to have branch libraries that also present language materials. So just putting that out there. Director Knowles-Pressey?
Yeah, kind of in that vein, I was wondering, and I don't want to deviate too much about the important work that's being done with our English language learners. And I do just want to say that I appreciate so much all the effort that staff has put in for supporting our students and our community members. But I was just wondering what kind of relationships, and I guess I'm thinking specifically in our welcoming schools in Waldo and McKay and North, that we have with the refugee resettlement agencies. Because I remember back when I lived in Albuquerque and supported a refugee resettlement agency, just how integrated we were with folks' education and supporting them in enrolling their kids and going to parent-teacher conferences to just make sure that they had that support and that understanding. And I remember taking plenty of kids to the library in Albuquerque and trying to tutor some kids in math. And math is not my strong suit, but I did my best.
So yes, one of the reasons you're seeing such an uptick in numbers is because we are a pretty welcoming community and we have resources. So we partner with Salem for Refugees as one of our primary partners for exactly that reason. And it's also things like how do you get to school? We have kids that have never gotten on a bus before. We have kids that are scared to walk from because of the countries they've come from, and it isn't safe to walk to school. So we work on a lot of that with Salem for Refugees, and they're also great partners in navigating language so that we can get right placements for kids in that time, which is really important to us, because we don't always speak, even if they spoke English, they might not have the academic language of the United States related to our schooling system. So they really help with the right placements. Salem for Refugees is our primary partner in that. And then I think Dr. West or Director Brewery-Fink, any other partner agencies that you can think of, or do they mostly come through Salem for Refugees?
They do mostly come through Salem for Refugees. And just as an added note, Salem for Refugees is a federally authorized relocation group now. So they actually will see more refugees actually come into our community here over the next several years. And they're super at supporting with housing, with all of the things that a new refugee family needs, including learning how to navigate a school system that is quite different often than the experience of the students from their native country.
Yeah, that was one of the pieces that I noticed very quickly when I moved here to Salem, is just because like I came from a background of supporting our refugees in learning the transit system. And I was like, where's the transit system? Yeah, so super grateful for all the work and super grateful for the work that Salem for Refugees does. I definitely remember French saving my butt with some African refugees, because otherwise I would not have been able to communicate at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really the thing too we really notice in our refugee students, they're coming with multiple languages, and so really the program design of building on that as an asset to get them, but also remember sometimes they're coming to us as 15-year-olds. I remember a situation where I navigated an OSAA hardship complaint related to a student who was going to be age out of eligibility because of the time they came. And it's like, oh my gosh, please, the student ought to be able to run cross country. So we try to navigate those on an individual basis, because we want them not only to graduate, we also want them connected to the school community as well.
Director Chandigiri.
I want to ask a question. How can parents and other community members, I come from South Asia, India, and others, how can we volunteer and support this? Because we speak multiple languages, but we may not go through the refugee foundation. Some of them are frankly not refugees. They could be recent arrival immigrant English language learners. you have 97 or 100 different languages. We just spoke one language, but remaining 15% is close to 100, right? How can we support, because each of us are like Sikh community or South Asian community or Chakusi community or Marshallese community, how can we volunteer and support children and either reading book in English for them or helping in different ways? Like I once translated, somebody was speaking Urdu. So your, equity department called, I think, was it Mrs. Richardson called me and said I translated for her in Urdu with a Pakistani family. So how can we get involved as community members, not as a board director, as a community member, or our temple or Sikh temple or Salem Islamic Foundation? How can we get the word out and start volunteering in school and be an asset? Everybody is connected to somebody, I'll tell you.
Two thoughts on that. Interesting. Well, first of all, Salem for Refugee is a great first step, and anybody you know that can volunteer for Salem for Refugee, because they're so connected and they create that web of service and support, giving the right support at the right time. And then I just also wonder, as you're thinking about that, as you're asking that, is how we could centrally develop a list of volunteers and the languages they speak. And so that's my first thought. I don't have a clear thought out plan on it, but I think that's a great kind of idea.
Thank you, Superintendent Terry.
Yeah, and I appreciate that question too, and maybe getting a list of all of our CBOs within our district that really participate with us or may have grants to help serve our parents and community members and students. So thank you. Okay, before we move on, I think I'm gonna ask if directors and everybody else needs a quick bathroom break. Okay, I'm getting used to this. All right, it's 7:22. Let's come back in 5 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the presentation, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair.
They're ready to go. So welcome back, everybody. Moving on to our agenda item number 3 is our resolution number 202122-20 in support of, in support of a dual language expansion. And so I'll ask our superintendent, Christy Perry, to review this item for us.
Dr. Idos Nataf is going to, he's having a little computer glitch. I can't unmute and he's having a computer glitch. You have seen there he is. Yeah, not him, it's his computer. This is a draft of the dual language expansion, and this is presented as a first reading. I believe a number of you have already seen this. And the goal tonight is for you to express what your thoughts are. Do you want it to move forward? Do you go on to a second reading? Are there changes as a board you'd like to see? And then we can, if the will of the board is to bring it forward, we can bring it forward for a vote in May. So our goal was to kind of let you know where we were in our expansion process, so you could then couch that in a resolution. All right, so with that, I'll just open it up for comments, questions, any thoughts? Maybe we can start with the first 4 whereases. Is there any concerns about the first 4? Or do you just want to take it in its entirety? I'm not sure.
I think probably just in its entirety, and then if we can get the presentation pulled down, all the board directors have a copy. And that way I can see which hands, if there's multiple hands that come up. I see Vice Chair Carson Cunningham. Go ahead, question.
Thank you. Just one second, buddy. I'm on. I just wanted to say that I think the resolution looks wonderful, and I really appreciate all of the work that the district has done to get everything to this point. It's going to be incredible as we build these programs, and I'm just very grateful. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you like me to share or to stop share? I didn't quite catch that.
I was kind of reading through it. If we could put it back.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that.
Is there other questions at the moment? Director Chandigiri, you're nodding your head as you have a question.
I have it's not a question. I just have a comment to say thank you very much. I really appreciate our district and parents groups, our coalition, SK coalition leaders, and the leaders from SIA and so many people who have, and from our district staff and things like that. I'm just filled with gratitude for what you have done, and you have championed it for so long. And I feel this is a good thing. It is good. It is good for several reasons, because this is the right thing to do. To me, this is real equity. This is what equity is all about. You can make a huge difference in the people. Whoever I've reached out, whether it is ODE or people in the community, everybody truly appreciates this. I really want our district to hear that loud and clear. Second thing is, this is also very important because to me, this is also the civil rights, Title 6, Title 3, or whatever we want to call those numbers, but ultimately it is the right thing to do. There's an appellate ruling called Castaneda Standard, which really talks about these issues. So it is the fact that, and these are children who are going to be for our country. Our whole nation depends on having biliterate or multiliterate adults who are going to take care of me. And when you and I grow old, or they're going to be doctors and engineers and etc. So this is going to really be the best thing. So thank you very much. I really think, we have to start somewhere. unless we are bilingual, and first of all, bilingual is not enough. Biliterate, even that's not enough. Only then you can understand each other's culture. I mean, for me to say that I understand somebody else's culture, or for someone to say I'm proficient in Indian culture is going to be very hard unless we can communicate with each other. As a nation, we can come together if we can not only learn to understand each other, but also read each other's books and really truly appreciate at a deeper level. And, whether it's in healthcare or being in the high, demand fields, or the social gaps you see, whether it's in criminal justice system or social systems, or all those achievement gaps or disparate outcomes, we can really close it by this. So I really think I would please ask all our board directors to support this and be like an informed oversight accountability. This has to continue beyond my lifetime, because this is just a start, because we got like 97 different languages, and by the time we can get through this, even the cohort that starts now, we need to promise them for 12 years. I'm just using that as a simple example. So this is just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead, and we'll all have to come together to continue to shepherd this program way beyond our lifetime, all our lifetimes. So thank you very much. I'm so glad that you named the schools. And with that comes a commitment, because these kids will be in the next grade by next year. So we need to be prepared for that. So every year we'll be adding and getting the pipeline ready for these kids. So with that, I'm going to say, because, other countries are already bilingual. Europe, everybody learns English as a second language. The second common language is Russian. Most countries are bilingual, biliterate, or multilingual. So we can get there. So thank you very much. I hope we use this as a vision for us to move forward, and we'll continue to support. And I ask the community to continue to support us in this. So thank you. This looks great. I mean, let's kind of move forward, and please bring it for vote. That's all I ask our leaders. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for providing the feedback and support, and couldn't agree more with you on this effort. Any other comments from our directors at this moment?
Brief comment.
I have a quick comment. The team that Superintendent Perry, you asked them to give us a little presentation. I want to specifically call their name. I mean, in the sense, say how much I appreciate Deputy Superintendent Olga and, Mrs. Tolento and the rest of your team that has been working so hard. And the fact that you gave us a private presentation, like for a few of us. So thank you very much. That was a very good presentation, and I kept notes from that as well.
And I just want to make one comment too. I think in that presentation at that point, we weren't able to name schools, in part because we needed to be sure we had staff readiness, and we needed staff buy-in before we officially. So we were working in lots of different places to be sure we calculated readiness. Because really important that we launch and are successful in those first launches. So we're thrilled to be able to talk about it publicly and which schools.
Thank you for that. Director Guzman-Ortiz, and then Director Hine.
Thank you. And I don't have super clear comments as I reviewed the resolution, and understanding that it is about, the dual language, but just as we heard during today's discussion, really thinking about our multilingual students and acknowledging that there are students that have more than one or two languages already, and just considering including some acknowledgement and recognition of that in here. I understand that ODE possibly still uses English language learner, and there might be conversation, or, like the language and the wording that ODE uses, for example, and that we abide by. But, even that might be changing in the near future as we see our these students as through a strengths-based lens versus the deficient, which I think is what has been the norm for a very long time. So
yeah, and I think one of the things maybe we'll do is go back through and be sure this is really asset-based language everywhere. That was how we tried to write it, but I don't know if there's a place in this to recognize the assets of some of our other groups of students that might not participate in dual language. So we'll go back and read through with that lens.
Thank you for that. Director Hyan?
Yes, thank you. The proclamation says, or resolution, whatever it is, sorry, 2 board members regularly participate on the Dual Language Advisory Committee. I haven't heard anything about that, so I'm assuming I'm not one that you've selected. Who is going to be participating? Is it going to be anybody that's been on the board more than or less than a year?
Thank you, Director Hyan. Myself, Director Guzman Ortiz and Director Noes Pressey have been participating, as well as Director Chandagiri through communication, and have all been participating in some type of form in these meetings with Dual Language New Mexico, feedback, emails. So for us, that's who's been working on this. But before our time, maybe Director or Superintendent Perry can provide a little bit more feedback.
Yeah, I think through the SIA process is where the previous board members participated. And the really big involvement that started with New Mexico, Dual Language New Mexico, started this year. And one thing I just want to note is that several of the people responsible for implementation have been out subbing in buildings. So we're super thrilled to be able to get here, but we really got started in earnest in December. Although maybe it was December we met, Director Chandagiri. I've lost track of time.
You're muted, Director Chandagiri.
Yes. I initially started with the email to our second vice chair, Ineos Pressey, and Guzman Ortiz, Director Guzman Ortiz, and then kind of that snowballed. So it was from January, there has been back and forth some email. And I specifically want to also recognize our budget committee member, Mrs. Keo. She has also been very kind enough to kind of lend voice, and also, of course, our district team. So I think it's going to take all of us. I mean, it's like, it's not like that only those 3 or thing. I want, to me, this is like everybody can roll up their sleeves and show up, because to me, this is really, it's too precious. We really need everybody's participation and commitment in this to succeed. Each one of us can be an ambassador, not only for our own language, but also to go back to our community and talk about the value of training the young brains in more than one language. Why stop at bilingual? We can have multilingual. Between me and my wife, we speak 8 languages. So there's no side effects to learning more languages. I'll tell you one thing. So I think each one of us have important responsibility. If our chair and vice chair and the second vice chair permit us, maybe we can take turns and participate in this bilingual or whatever that dual language thing. We're talking about the term, the better term would be either a multilingual potential or emerging English language learner would be a nice thing. But, we can figure out a term we can use, but it's more than dual language. That's what I'm really trying to say. It's not like an English language learner. Those were old terms. Now, what could be a better way to understand would be an emerging English learner or, multilingual learners.
Yeah, thank you.
The nation is going to have more of this, whether we like it or not. So we have to figure out a term, but let's not get stuck on a term to the point of losing sight of what we're trying to do.
No, yeah, I agree. But right now we're only learning 2 languages, so kind of have to stick with the dual. There's what would be. But yes, the Dual Language Advisory Committee through the district, through our committee members and district staff and board members, we appreciate it. I really appreciate everything we're doing here. And one question I do have is that I didn't ask earlier. How are we using the strengths of our existing dual language programs, Herrick, Grant, Walker, and West Salem, and how are they intertwined with the expansion?
I'll let Assistant Superintendent Cobb answer that. And I think we could go ahead and put down the resolution now as well. I don't think there are any more questions on that.
So we have worked in the past 3 years to align our instructional practice. So in preparation of these, we have been working with those schools in aligning instructional practices so that we can use them as models for all these other programs that are coming on. And like Director Tolento explained, we are having different trainings, some for our existing dual language programs so that we can continue just getting better at the services that they are providing. And then some for our newer programs, some that are just for all bilingual teachers in the district in preparation for dual language expansion. So just they're involved in a different level just to continue to increase the effectiveness of their practices and also serve as models for all of the other programs that are joining in, and then keep working on their own practice. And also we're hoping to hire more teachers for these programs so that they can continue to grow mostly at the middle and high school levels.
I think one of our, I think one of our bilingual teachers is out of the dual language program in West Salem that is currently working for us right now. I think they're at McKay.
Great. Yeah, and I appreciate it because the community it builds, especially around the elementary school, the events that are put on, very welcoming, very supportive, and the joy of parents and students, and you hear students speaking among themselves in Spanish or English and or bilingual or Spanglish, the way that I speak a lot, and it's amazing. So I really appreciate it that we're tapping into them because they've shown how successful they can be. That everybody's been involved, and just parents, coming across the city just to make sure they got their students in there, and it's paying off dividends. So, Director Chandigarh.
Yeah, see, I mean, this is a very good opportunity. Are we kind of thinking of creating a website, like a separate website or a dashboard where all the community can start seeing the 97 different languages, how the dual language program will expand, so that parents can have much more visibility of what the program offers, where it is offered, how to understand this, so that there's almost like a real-time parents public-facing dashboard kind of things. At least because now what I see is that each school has a separate website, whatever that link about that, like you go to that, the third, one of the 2-3 dual language, they all have their own, but will there be a community-wide or a district-wide separate website which shows where all we have the program, how we plan to improve it, and then what kind of courses are offered, and so that parents can become more understanding and knowledge. It can become like a way to explain to the community on a real-time basis and start recruiting more people to participate. Because there's one thing I noticed, there's not much visibility for those 3 programs versus others. They can be, some people, it's more like a word of mouth, we get to know, but we don't have that kind of advertised everywhere, so that I don't want to use the word market this program, but in other words, educate the community to understand the value and where it is offered, and what is the need to literally be eager to apply for this, because this is a very good model that I think we should be putting it everywhere, but push the program to everybody should know about where it is offered, what the pipeline will be after the elementary school, which middle school they'll go to, which high school, and what are the different programs that is offered in that pipeline so the public can see it, how many vacant, how to apply for this. That's my maybe I'm talking too much. Stop me if I'm talking.
We are developing a website just for our dual language programming. And we also do a webinar in English and in Spanish for families that are interested in the program. And we do this webinar in about, usually every year in February, and we post it in our site. So thank you for the feedback. We are creating a website that is very specific for dual language, where we can post all of these informational meetings that we already host with parents.
You know, just as a side note, I went to the Color Caucus of OSBA meeting, and our second vice chair was there. And we discussed this, and I'm planning to go again this month end. I really want our state to adopt this as a standard and maybe get a legislation to support it, so that statewide we can talk about dual language immersion as the standard, gold standard, so that why should we continue to have disparate outcomes, and why not we aim for this as a standard, and then that way we'll have consistent funding, we'll have support from everybody. Before, you know, that's how I was just throwing that idea. Let's see if we can get traction, and we have 2 legislative LPC members, and if they want to consider bringing it up as a legislation concept, and make sure that this becomes kind of part of a legislation, so this can be a standard, that way we don't have to keep waiting for grants and funds, because then we'll have a little bit more consistent funding and an expectation. I'm just throwing an idea. I hope the 2 LPC members will help us bring it forward.
Thank you, Director Chandigarh. Superintendent Perry, you're going to say something?
I had a couple thoughts, but I'm good. Thank you. It was all positive, but I knew we were getting near the end of our time.
Okay, great. Thank you. I really appreciate these conversations with this resolution. I believe that we'll ask that it come to a vote for the coming meeting, the next coming meeting. If you have other suggestions for this resolution, please send them in to board leadership or to Alice, and she'll get them out to us. And we'll make sure we can discuss it and edit and whatnot. But we feel really supportive, I think, from the board, from tonight's conversation, along with our student advisor, Grace. And I'm excited. I can't say anything more about that. And I just want to reiterate today that I want to appreciate all our educators out there during this time, and all the work and effort that we're all doing, that you're all doing with our students. We understand it's been challenging. However, we are here to support you. There's many parents across the district, because I believe this community is supportive of this, of our educators, and making sure that you are supported and understand that you are not glorified babysitters. You are professional educators, and we recognize that. And from your board leadership and from this board, we want to make sure that that is demonstrated within the board, within outside of our lives, that we need to continue and stay that commitment, that we hear you, we hear the challenges, and we'll continue to do better, so that you can do better and be better as you wish. So thank you, everybody, for being here tonight, for listening, for participating, and all the work that's been going into all the work that was presented tonight and all throughout the school year. It is 7:51. We'll call this meeting adjourned. Until next time, thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a great night, everyone.
For more videos and information, go to capitalcommunitymedia.org and follow us on social media.